Hi, I want to talk about the part of retirement I was least prepared for. Not the money, though the money mattered. Not Medicare, though I had to learn that too. Not Social Security survivor benefits, though I can tell you those papers do not explain themselves. Not the pension from the school district, or the budget, or the paid-off mortgage Frank left me so carefully prepared for. The part I was least prepared for was Tuesday morning, just Tuesday. A quiet house, a full day, no work to go to, no husband reading the paper at the kitchen table, no one asking if I wanted eggs, no school calendar, no meeting, no lunch packed, no reason I had to be dressed by 8:15. I had planned for retirement on paper. Frank and I had done that together. Then Frank died before we got to live it. And when I retired in 2021, I wasn't walking into the retirement we had planned. I was walking into a day that belonged entirely to me. That sounds like freedom. Some days it is, but some days, when you're figuring it out alone, freedom can feel like a room with all the furniture removed. You stand there and think, well, where do I put myself? That's the question nobody asked me. Not how much do you have saved, not where will you live, not what will Medicare cover. Where do you put yourself when the person who helped give shape to your days is gone? That was the hard part. And building a daily routine became less about productivity and more about not floating away. The fear for me was that I would disappear inside my own house. That sounds dramatic. I don't mean it dramatically. I mean I could go a whole day and nobody would need me to be anywhere. Nobody would notice if lunch happened at 11:30 or 3. Nobody would care if I stayed in the same cardigan. Nobody would ask what I was reading. Nobody would say, "Carol, did you call the insurance company?" in that frank way, where it was both a question and a calendar reminder. You wake up and the day is yours, but it doesn't quite feel like a gift yet. And that feels strange. Not good weird, just weird. I had spent more than 40 years working around other people's schedules. Third graders, teachers, principals, consultants, parents who wrote emails with too many exclamation points. Then suddenly no one was organizing my day but me, and I didn't trust myself with it at first. I'm not going to give you a perfect morning routine. Mine is not perfect. Some days it has toast crumbs in it and a cardigan I should have washed last week. I'm just going to tell you what happened when I tried to build a day after the life I planned changed without my permission. We're standing in the hallway and I'm holding Frank's old clipboard. That was maybe 3 months after I retired. The clipboard had been in the drawer near the phone. He used it for house projects, insurance notes, travel lists, anything that required what he called a clean surface and a functioning pen. I found it while looking for batteries. Of course I did. You never find grief where you expect it. You find it between the batteries and the tape measure. There was a sheet still clipped to it, Frank's handwriting at the top, National Parks, underlined twice. He had made a list of places we were going to see after I retired. Shenandoah, Glacier, Acadia, Yellowstone, though he had written beside it, "Not in July, too many people," because Frank would have had an opinion about this. He always did. I stood there and looked at that list for a long time. Then I took the clipboard into the kitchen and sat down with tea I had forgotten to drink. The house was very quiet, and I realized something I hadn't let myself say plainly. I did not know how to make plans without making them with him. Not big plans, not life plans, daily plans, what time to eat, whether to go to the grocery store today or tomorrow, whether the laundry could wait, whether to sit outside, whether to call Jen back immediately or let her have her own afternoon. It all felt too small to be hard. That's what made it harder. When a big thing is hard, people understand. When Tuesday is hard, you start wondering what's wrong with you. That afternoon, I opened my notebook, the one I call the book. I wrote one sentence. What has to happen today? Not what should happen, Not what would impress anyone, not what Frank and I would have done, just what has to happen today. That was the beginning. So I want to talk about building a daily routine when you're figuring it out alone. Not a strict schedule, not a beautiful printed planner, not a life that looks organized from the outside, just a day that holds you. I want to talk about the small anchors that helped me, the ones I resisted, the ones that surprised me, and the ones that still fall apart sometimes, because I want to be honest about that too. The first thing I had to build was a morning that did not depend on memory. Mornings were the worst at first. Evenings get all the attention when people talk about being alone. And yes, evenings can be difficult, but mornings have their own ache. For almost 40 years, Frank and I had a morning rhythm. He made coffee, I made toast. He read the weather out loud, even though I had not asked for it. I corrected him if he called partly cloudy, mostly sunny, because we had reached the point in marriage where even the sky could be discussed with unnecessary precision. After he died, I stopped drinking coffee for a while. The smell was too connected to him. So I switched to tea. That sounds like a small thing. It was not small to me. For months, morning felt like walking into a room where someone had just left. When I retired, that feeling got sharper because work was no longer waiting to pull me forward. I could sit too long. I could drift. I could check my phone before I had even opened the curtains, and then somehow it was 10:40 and I had learned 8 things I did not need to know. So I made a rule, not a grand rule, a very small one. Tea first, curtains second, bed made third. That was it. I did not start with exercise, prayer, journaling, stretching, vitamins, and reading something improving. That would have lasted 4 days and then made me feel like a failed camp counselor. Tea, curtains, bed. Those 3 things told my body the day had started. I don't fully understand why making the bed helped as much as it did, but it did. Maybe because it made the room stop looking abandoned. Maybe because it gave me one completed thing before the day could become too large. Frank would have made the bed poorly. I feel I should say that. He was a good man. He was not gifted with corners. I still hear him saying, "It's covered, isn't it?" And sometimes I laugh when I make it. That's a better morning than crying into the sheets, though I've done that too. The second thing I had to build was one reason to leave the house before noon. Not every day, but often enough. When you're alone, the house can become too reasonable. Everything you need is there. Food, laundry, television, the comfortable chair, the stack of mail, the little jobs that convince you you've been productive, while keeping you inside the same 4 walls. At first, I thought staying home meant I was resting. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it meant I was shrinking. There was a week, maybe early that first summer, when I realized I had not spoken out loud to another person since Sunday church. That startled me. I had talked to myself. I had talked to the plant in the living room, which is doing better than several plants before it and deserves encouragement. But I had not had a real conversation. So I made a loose promise to myself. Before noon, if I could, I would put myself somewhere another human being might see me. The library, the grocery store, the walking path, church office, a little cafe where the tea is not as good as mine, but the chairs are better. Not for a big social life, just so I would remain visible. One Tuesday, I went to the library with no real purpose. I returned a mystery novel I did not enjoy and checked out another one by the same author, which tells you something about my standards. I ran into a woman named Elaine from church near the large print section. She asked how I was, and I almost said fine, because that's what we do. Instead, I said, "I'm having a strange morning." She said, "Me too." That was it. Nothing profound. We stood there for 7 minutes between the biographies and the westerns, having a strange morning together. I drove home feeling steadier. That's when I figured out leaving the house wasn't always about errands. Sometimes it was about letting the world confirm you were still in it. The third thing I had to build was a meal routine that didn't make me feel like a leftover person. Cooking for one is this little emotional test nobody prepares you for. Frank cooked more than people might expect. Civil engineer, county job, very precise chili. Too precise if we're being honest. He measured cumin like it was bridge material. After he died, food became odd. For a while, people brought casseroles. Then they stopped, which was right. They had lives. I had a freezer full of things in foil containers with no labels, which became a game I did not enjoy. After I retired, dinner became the hardest meal. Breakfast was tea and toast. Lunch could be soup. But dinner had been our meal. The time we reviewed the day. The time Frank told me something about the county that I pretended to understand. The time I told him something about curriculum that he pretended to understand. A fair arrangement. Eating dinner alone at 5:30 felt too early. At 7:30 it felt too sad. So for a while I grazed. Crackers, cheese, half an apple, a bowl of cereal standing at the counter, which would have made my mother sigh audibly from the next world. Then one night I looked at myself eating cereal over the sink and thought, Carol Ann, this is not a dinner. This is evidence. So I made another small structure. Real dinner at the table, at least 4 nights a week. Not fancy. A baked potato. Soup in a real bowl. A piece of chicken. Salad from a bag because I am retired, not heroic. A napkin. A glass of water. Sometimes a candle, though I felt foolish the first time. I sit at the table, not the counter. The first few times it hurt. Then it helped. I started putting music on, low, usually something Frank would have called your sad lady music, though not all of it is sad. Some of it is just quiet, and he had categories that were not fair. The point was not the food. The point was telling myself I was still worth serving. That's a sentence I could not have said easily at the time. But it's true. A routine is not just what you do. Sometimes it's how you treat yourself when no one is watching. The fourth thing I had to build was a way to handle the dangerous hour. Mine is around 4:30. I don't know if everyone has one. Maybe yours is morning. Maybe it's after dinner. Maybe it's Sunday afternoon. For me, it's late afternoon, when the light starts changing and the day is no longer new but not yet over. Frank used to come home around then when he was working. Later, when he retired, he would start talking about dinner around then. Or he'd come in from the yard and tell me something was going to need attention, which usually meant money. After he was gone, 4:30 became the hour when the house felt most aware of itself. The shadows changed. The refrigerator hummed. The chair was empty. The day asked, now what? For a while I answered that question with television. There's nothing wrong with television. I still watch it. But I was using it to cover the hour like a blanket over a chair I didn't want to see. So I made 4:30 a transition. Not a task list, a transition. I make tea. I check the mail. I walk out to the porch if the weather allows. I write down 3 things from the day in the book. Sometimes they're very small. Called Patty. Washed towels. Saw a cardinal. That last one appears more than you would expect. Some days the 3 things are unimpressive. Some days one of them is change the batteries in the remote. And I feel that should count double because the back of that remote was designed by someone with no mercy. But the act of writing them down does something. It tells the day it happened. It tells me I was here. I started doing this after talking with my sister Patty, who is widowed too and a little further down the road. I call her my advanced scout. She told me, you don't have to make every day meaningful. Just don't let them vanish. That stayed with me. I think about it at 4:30. Just don't let them vanish. The fifth thing I had to build was a weekly shape, not just a daily one. A single day can be managed. A whole week can feel like a field. After I retired, I noticed weekends did not feel much different from weekdays. That sounds nice until Sunday evening arrives and you realize nothing has changed because nothing was marked. When I was teaching, the week had a structure. Monday had a mood, Friday had a mercy, Sunday night had papers, laundry, and a little dread. Retirement softened all those edges. At first, I liked that. Then I missed the edges. So I gave the week a gentle pattern. Monday is house reset. Not deep cleaning. I am no longer auditioning for a cleaning commercial. Just laundry, sheets if needed, kitchen, trash. Wednesday is errands and budget. I look at the spreadsheet Frank made. It's called Carol's Numbers now. I changed the header and kept almost everything else. I update what I spent, check what bills cleared, and then I close it before it starts giving me opinions. Thursday is Patty. We talk in the afternoon, sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for 2 hours. She tells me what's happening in Indianapolis, and I tell her what's happening here. Usually nothing dramatic. That's the comfort of it. Sunday is church when I can go. Not because every Sunday feels deeply spiritual. Some Sundays I go because it gets me dressed and sitting beside people who know my name. I don't say that to diminish it. I think that may be part of what church is for. Jen comes every 6 weeks or so with Tony and the kids. David calls every Sunday from Portland. He took that from Frank, though I don't know if he knows it. Frank called his mother every Sunday for years. That call gives Sunday a center. Not the whole day, just a center. And that has helped more than I expected. The sixth thing I had to build was permission for the routine to fail. This may be the most important part, because it does fail. A routine is not a contract. It's a handrail. Some mornings I don't open the curtains right away. Some weeks I don't make it to the library. Some dinners are still crackers and cheese, because I'm human, and cheese is persuasive. Some days are better than others. Yesterday might be a better one. Tomorrow might not be. That doesn't mean the whole thing is broken. It means I'm alive inside a life that changes. I had to learn not to punish myself for having a hard day. Frank would have been practical about this. He would have said, "Start again tomorrow," and then he would have checked the weather in case starting again required a jacket. I used to think routine meant discipline. Now I think it means mercy. It gives me something to return to, not something to obey. There was a Saturday last winter when I did almost none of it. I stayed in the chair too long. I watched 2 episodes of a show I didn't even like. I ate toast for dinner. I ignored the towels in the dryer until they became wrinkled beyond apology. At 8, Jen called. I almost didn't answer because I didn't want to be discovered. That's the word, discovered. As if there is a retirement police officer checking whether widows have properly structured their Saturdays. I answered. Jen said, "How was your day?" I said, "A little shapeless." She got quiet, then said, "Do you want me to come tomorrow?" I said no, and I meant it. Because a shapeless day is not an emergency. It's just a shapeless day. The next morning I made tea, opened the curtains, made the bed, and came back to myself. That's the whole point. Not never falling out of rhythm. Having a rhythm gentle enough to find again. I don't want to make this sound tidier than it is. There are still mornings when the quiet gets to me. There are still afternoons when I miss the life Frank and I planned so sharply that I feel almost foolish. We were going to see the national parks. He had the list. He had notes. He had strong feelings about July at Yellowstone. I still have that list. I don't know yet what I'm doing with all of it. But I know this. A daily routine did not solve loneliness. It gave loneliness less room to run the house. That is different, and it matters. The house feels more like mine now, not less his. That's not how it works. Frank is still everywhere in small ways. The spreadsheet, the chair, the chili recipe I still can't get right, the way David calls on Sundays, the way I still look at the yard and think he would have had an opinion about that. But the days are more mine than they were. I earned that slowly. One cup of tea at a time, one opened curtain, one real dinner, one strange morning at the library, one 4:30 that did not vanish. If any of this sounds familiar, leave a comment. I would like to know one specific thing. What is one small routine that helped you feel steadier when life changed? Not a perfect routine, not something impressive, something real. Maybe it's making the bed, walking to the mailbox, calling your sister, eating dinner at the table, sitting outside before the news comes on, writing 3 things down before bed, feeding the dog at the same time, going to church even when you don't feel particularly church-like. Tell me that one thing. I read those comments. I find them useful, more useful than I expected to, and I think other people do too, especially the ones who are sitting in a quiet house trying to figure out where to put themselves in the day. Okay, I think that's what I wanted to say. Thanks for being here.